We edited this book last year for the Center for Economic Policy Research, a European research group, the economic consequences of the second Trump administration. So it's a very dense document. We have more than 50 specialists. And there was some discussion about how to do outreach, how to connect this material with broader audiences. The goal of the podcast is to focus on demystifying relatively complex and totally fascinating policy issues, particularly around economics and finance. That's what we do in the classroom, Gary and I, multiple classrooms, particularly one course on exactly these kinds of topics. And that's what we're trying to bring to the podcast. And so far, at least, we've been very happy. And the listeners we've managed to attract so far have also given us some good feedback.
How do you define power and consequences?
Power is the power of ideas, the power in politics, economic power, technological power. We look at history to see what lessons can be drawn for today. You know, every law was written by humans, and those laws written by humans were in a context of a certain policy debate at that time, and generally some economic debate at that time, and in a technological context. So we do a lot of that on the podcast. As for consequences, it's what does it mean to our viewers? So we look at today and yesterday to see what does this mean for you, the listener, for tomorrow. How do you invest around it? How do you think about your economic well-being, your families, or your businesses? And what are the consequences for tomorrow's power centers as well?
I have to say, John, we thought of a lot of different potential titles. Our students gave us terrific input. There's, I think, 4.5 million podcasts out there, so most of the good titles are taken already. And then Gary said, how about power and consequences? And for me, that kind of clicked, because a lot of times what we talk about and what interests our students is who has power, what does power mean, what do you do if you have power? But then they're really interested, and we're really interested in, what are the consequences? Who does that impact? So episodes we've done so far include monetary policy, economic effects of the US-Iran conflict. Is Greenland next? That's where we're around this week. Next week is prediction markets, and the week after is private credit under pressure. So I think that title, Gary, thank you for coming up with it, lets us cover a really wide range of topics that frankly interest us.
At the core of Simon's research over decades, I mean, he researches so many things. He's one of these multi-talented individuals. But that core research with Daron Acemoglu and Jim Robinson that was really recognized, properly recognized with this Nobel Prize, is about institutions and the rule of law, both political institutions and economic institutions, and how they can be tilted towards one group of the public rather than another group. It could be the elite, or it could be the broad public. And every policy debate that we bring into the classroom for our students, we remind them that policy choices affect individuals, but they don't affect individuals uniformly. They tend to have some ebb and flow or push. And so that also appealed to me, that that's also the power, and then the consequences of who are the winners, who are the losers, and in economic terms, look at what are the economic rents, what's being extracted possibly from the system. And this, of course, is a matter of choice in these policy debates. Do you create something where one set of parties can extract rents or excess profits? Or do you do something that creates public goods? In capital markets, we think of that around transparency, market integrity, access, competition in a market. Because, of course, in any policy debate, there are winners and losers.
Do you plan on bringing on guests?
I would hope so, because also we'll broaden out the discussion. And we do that in the classroom as well from time to time. Many classes are just the Gary and Simon show, or if you wish, the Simon and Gary show. But when we have those guest speakers, it's just marvelous. We tend to like to set up the conversation with our students, and I think we'll be tempted to do that here as well. But if we've dove into immigration, do we have an immigration expert to come in at some point? If we dive into a topic and then bring somebody later.
I think it's the combination, Gary, that works well in the classroom. So we make sure the students are really well informed and well briefed. And Gary, as you may know, John, is really an intense preparer for everything. So he gets me prepared and the students really prepared. And we often have a discussion with just chaired by the two of us for a whole 90 minutes. And then a follow-up discussion where we bring one of the world's leading experts on this issue, for example, immigration or monetary policy. And then the back and forth with the student, which is moderated by us and involves us, that's much more intense and much more enlightening, I think, for everyone. And I tell the students that my main objective in all of these discussions is to have the guests to stagger out the room afterwards saying, whoa, these MIT people are pretty intense. That's what I'm looking for, as well as a big exchange of ideas and substance.
What are the key takeaways from the immigration episode?
We, the United States, have benefited tremendously based upon our immigrant heritage. Other than Native Americans who were here when Europeans first came, the vast majority of Americans are descendants of immigrants. And we've greatly benefited, but the other lesson is we've oscillated. We had that whole 19th century that was pretty open. We started to close to Asians and particularly Chinese in the 1870s. But then we really shut the border down quite a bit in the 1920s. My personal life story involves that my grandparents came, but their siblings were shut out, and a number of them lost their lives in the Holocaust. And then we opened up again in the 1960s, and we seem to oscillate, and here we are in the 2020s, narrowing that window of opportunity. Now, along the way, we have some other messages. It's going to have consequences in this country now by lowering economic growth, probably by 0.5% to 0.7%. It's just math. We're going to have less people coming in to fill the labor pool, and it affects a lot of sectors, not just agricultural sectors, but healthcare and service sectors and construction and many others.
In the rather epic preparation for that classroom discussion and episode, Gary found an article from the New York Times in 1924 written by Senator Reid, who was the sponsor of the immigration legislation that was adopted in that year. And in this article, that Senator Reid laid out why he felt immigration needed to be restricted. And the language is not the modern language. There's much more open discussion of race than you would hear today. But a lot of the fears being expressed are remarkably modern. Fears about where are the jobs going to come from, fears about the rest of the world being disrupted and dangerous, and therefore people flooding excessively quickly to the United States. To Gary's point, there's this question of, is there a cycle? Are we coming back around because of what's happened in the labor market, because of what's happened to inequality, because a lot of people have got pushed down to the lower end of the labor market? There's definitely that pressure. But at the same time, as Gary said, we've become an economy that's about technology, it's about innovation, it's about building and expanding. And in that economy, immigrants like myself, I've been here for 40 years, I'm very proud to have become a US citizen. Immigrants have been an important part of the story. So which is going to prevail now? The circling, this tendency to say, we're not really sure if we can take in so many new people, or allowing new people to come, providing them with opportunity and using that dynamic to help the United States become more prosperous and more powerful.
What's wonderful is that I was born here. I'm second generation, but Simon is an immigrant, and he chose to come here and contribute his energy, his intellect, his insatiable curiosity to this country. He becomes a citizen and, yes, ends up winning a Nobel Prize in economics as an American. So, we bring that into an episode like that. In an episode that we just will be releasing in the next week or so about private credit, we like looking at history and saying, well, where are there lessons? So is there a lesson, for instance, from the junk bond era of the 1980s and Barbarian of the Gate and all the leveraged buyouts and so forth? And that came asunder in 1990 with on multiple things, but the collapse of Drexel Burnham. And yes, we had the savings and loan crisis. And yes, we had the 1990-91 recession. And, I guess a consequence of that was that Bill Clinton won the presidency in 92, and I'm on this show with you. So we like to look at those cycles in each of our podcasts.